You did not arrive at this moment by accident. Even if it feels ordinary, something within you slowed down just enough to listen. That pause matters. It is often the first sign that guidance is already at work, arranging timing long before the mind understands why. There are days when messages pass us by unnoticed, and then there are days when a single sentence feels as if it was placed directly in our path. Simply waiting until attention meets readiness. You may feel an unexplainable seriousness now. Not fear, not excitement, just a quiet sense that this moment deserves your presence. That feeling is accurate. Life speaks softly before it speaks clearly. Most people believe meaning arrives through dramatic signs, but direction usually comes through stillness, through moments that do not demand, but invite. Moments that ask only one thing: listen a little longer. If you have felt restless lately, unsure why, it is often because something is preparing to shift. Transitions announce themselves as unease before they become clarity. You may have been questioning choices, timing, or direction, wondering if you missed something important. That wondering is not weakness. It is awareness stretching toward understanding. There are messages that find us when we are distracted, and messages that wait until the soul is quiet enough to receive them. This one waited. Attention is not random. What you notice reveals what is ready to change. When something holds your focus without effort, it is because it carries relevance beyond thought. You may think you found this message, but it is just as true that this message found you at the precise point where resistance softened. They arrive calmly, trusting that recognition will do the work. You do not need to believe anything yet. You do not need to agree with everything. All that is required is presence. Presence allows alignment to form naturally. It begins as a feeling of being in the right place at the right time, even if you cannot explain why. There are times when the soul gathers information quietly, preparing you for a realization that cannot be rushed. When rushed, it slips away. When honored, it settles deeply. If you have been searching for reassurance, you may notice that reassurance does not arrive as answers at first. It arrives as calm, as steadiness, as a sense of being guided rather than abandoned. The feeling that you were meant to hear this today is not superstition. It is intuition recognizing a point of contact. There are crossroads that appear inwardly before they appear outwardly. At those moments, listening becomes more important than acting. Many rush past these moments, eager to move on, to scroll further, to stay busy. But busyness often delays what is ready to arrive. Stillness, even brief, allows truth to rise. You may feel drawn to stay just a little longer, to hear the next thought, to remain present without knowing why. That impulse is worth honoring. Life often places messages along the path quietly, trusting that those who need them will notice. The mind prefers explanations. The soul prefers recognition. Recognition feels like a gentle remembering, like something falling into place without effort. This message is not here to convince you of anything. It is here to meet you where you already are. You may feel as though something in your life is incomplete, not broken, unfinished. That sense of incompletion often precedes reordering. When the inner world begins to reorganize, the outer world follows in time. You may have been asking for direction, clarity, or reassurance. Answers do not always come as words. Sometimes they come as timing. This timing is precise. Nothing is being asked of you right now except attention. And attention, when given fully, is powerful. The moment you stop multitasking and listen, something subtle shifts. The body relaxes, the mind quiets, and guidance becomes audible. Guidance does not shout, it waits. You may notice that your thoughts are slowing as you listen, that is not coincidence. That is receptivity forming. Receptivity allows what is meant for you to reach you without obstruction. There is a reason you did not encounter this message earlier or later. Timing matters more than content. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where reception becomes possible. The feeling of meant to does not come from pressure. It comes from alignment. Alignment feels calm, not urgent, certain, not anxious. This is why the message does not demand action immediately. It prepares understanding first. Understanding reshapes choices without effort. If you listen deeply now, you may notice that something you were worrying about feels lighter. Not solved, just less heavy. That is the beginning of trust returning. Trust restores order quietly. Messages like this are reminders, not instructions. They remind you that you are not moving alone. Even when the path feels uncertain, there is support that operates beneath appearances. It does not interrupt, it arranges. You may have felt moments recently where things almost aligned, almost worked, almost made sense. Those were previews. This message is part of the sequence. You are not required to interpret everything right now. Meaning unfolds naturally when allowed. The most important realizations arrive when the mind stops trying to capture them. Stay present. Let the message settle. Because being meant to hear something is not about fate. It is about readiness. And readiness changes what comes next. You may not see immediate results, but you will notice a shift. Subtle, steady, reliable. Clarity will replace confusion. Calm will replace tension. Direction will replace doubt. This is how guidance works. Quietly, precisely, without force. You were meant to hear this today not because of chance, but because you were ready to receive it. And once received, something within you will begin to move differently. Not loudly, not suddenly, but surely. And that is how change truly begins. You did not arrive at this moment by accident. Though the mind is quick to dismiss such a statement, the intellect has been trained to believe in chance, coincidence, and wandering. Yet the soul has always known otherwise. There are moments when life pauses us gently, not through force or shock, but through a quiet drawing inward. And it is in those moments that divine order reveals itself most clearly. The very fact that you are listening now tells me something important. Readiness has already begun its work. I have observed through many years that guidance rarely announces itself with urgency. It does not shout. It does not plead. It waits. And when it waits with perfect patience, knowing that recognition is inevitable when the time is right. Many pass the same doorway again and again without entering, not because the door is hidden, but because attention has not yet softened enough to notice it. There are days when messages pass us like wind through an open window, leaving no trace, and then there are days when a single sentence arrests the mind, not with excitement, but with weight. It carries a gravity that cannot be explained. One feels compelled to stay still, to listen a little longer, to resist the urge to move on. This gravity is not emotional. It is spiritual recognition, and it is exact. People often believe that divine guidance must feel thrilling or dramatic. They expect a rush of emotion, a surge of certainty, or an overwhelming sense of purpose. But the true signal of guidance is often the opposite. It is calm, it is sober. It carries a seriousness that does not frighten but steadies. When guidance is present, the soul does not leap, it settles. I have seen many people miss their good because they expected it to arrive with fanfare. They were waiting for thunder when truth was speaking in a whisper. They were waiting for reassurance when alignment was already forming. And because they did not recognize the quietness of truth, they hurried past it. There is a law at work here, a law as exact as mathematics. Nothing enters consciousness without preparation. Encounters occur only when inner readiness meets outer timing. This readiness is often unconscious. The mind may feel uncertain, restless, or distracted, while the soul has already agreed. And when agreement has been made inwardly, life arranges the meeting outwardly. I once knew a woman who felt dissatisfied without knowing why. Her life appeared orderly, yet something within her felt unfinished. One afternoon, she nearly declined an invitation to hear a lecture, telling herself she was tired and it was inconvenient. At the last moment, she felt a quiet insistence, not urgency, but firmness, and she went. One sentence spoken that evening dissolved years of confusion for her. Later she told me, "I almost stayed home." That almost was the narrow margin between wandering and alignment. It is often so. Guidance does not force us. It invites us. And the invitation is subtle enough that it can be ignored without consequence, except delay. Nothing punishes us for missing a moment. Life simply waits and presents the lesson again, often through difficulty rather than ease. Restlessness is one of the most misunderstood signs in spiritual life. People believe restlessness means something is wrong. In truth, restlessness often appears when something is being rearranged. Before order is restored, movement occurs. Before clarity settles, uncertainty stirs. It is like furniture being shifted in a room. For a time, nothing feels quite right, but the disorder is temporary and purposeful. When you feel restless, you are not lost. You are being repositioned. I have noticed that people often feel uneasy just before they receive direction. They mistake this unease for doubt or failure, and they try to distract themselves from it. Yet unease, when not fed by fear, is simply the soul stretching toward its next understanding. It is the pause before recognition. This is why attention matters so deeply. Attention is not neutral. What you attend to gains entrance into your life. When you offer sustained attention without compulsion, without haste, without multitasking, you are already cooperating with law. You are saying inwardly, "I am willing to receive." Willingness is more powerful than effort. Effort strains the mind. Willingness opens it. I have often said that what we attend to, we invite. When you listen deeply, without demanding immediate answers, alignment begins forming of its own accord. The mind quiets not because it is forced to be still, but because it senses that something intelligent is present. Many people search for signs, not realizing that attention itself is the sign. What arrests you gently, without fear or excitement, carries meaning. The soul recognizes relevance before the mind understands content. And it found you not at a random hour, but at the precise point where resistance softened enough to allow entry. This is how guidance works. It does not intrude. It waits for consent. Consent does not feel dramatic. It feels like staying instead of leaving, listening instead of scrolling, pausing instead of rushing. I have seen lives change because someone stayed with a thought a little longer than usual. I have seen disaster avoided because someone listened to a quiet hesitation instead of pressing forward. I have seen prosperity appear because someone recognized that timing, not effort, was the missing element. Divine order does not require that you understand it fully. It requires only that you respect it enough to pause. Understanding follows obedience. People often want to know where a path leads before they take the first step, but the law works in reverse. The first step reveals the next. This is why faith is described as walking without seeing the entire road. Recognition comes before explanation. You are not being asked to believe anything yet. Belief comes later. What is being asked now is presence. Presence allows alignment to form naturally, without strain. Alignment is subtle. It begins as a feeling of being in the right place at the right time, even if you cannot explain why. When alignment is present, anxiety diminishes without effort. The mind stops scanning for danger. The body relaxes slightly. These are signs, though not the kind most people look for. If you have been questioning your direction, your timing, or your decisions, this moment is not here to correct you harshly. It is here to steady you, to remind you that nothing essential has been missed, that what belongs to you cannot pass you by. I have often said, and I repeat it now, because repetition impresses truth upon the subconscious. Divine order is now established in my affairs. I am always in my right place at my right time. What is meant for me cannot pass me by. These are not hopeful statements. They are laws spoken aloud. When repeated calmly, without argument, they reorganize expectation. Expectation governs outcome. Many people live with the hidden belief that they are late, behind, or forgotten. That belief, when unchallenged, creates unnecessary suffering. But the law does not operate through condemnation. It operates through correspondence. When belief shifts, experience follows. You may notice that as you listen, something you were carrying feels slightly lighter, not solved, not resolved, but less heavy. This is not imagination. It is the beginning of trust returning to its rightful place. Trust does not arrive all at once. It arrives in increments, each one earned by attention. Messages like this are not instructions as much as reminders. They remind you that life is not happening to you at random, that guidance has not withdrawn, that support operates beneath appearances, arranging circumstances long before results appear. There are moments when the soul gathers quietly, preparing for a realization that cannot be rushed. When rushed, it slips away. When honored, it settles deeply and permanently. This message is part of a sequence already in motion. You are not at the beginning, and you are not at the end. You are in the precise middle, where recognition begins to turn into understanding. Do not hurry this moment. Do not analyze it excessively. Allow it to do its work quietly, because the most important changes do not begin with action. They begin with agreement. And agreement begins the moment you recognize that you were meant to hear this today, now, exactly as you are. Just stay present. That is enough. When recognition has dawned and one has consented inwardly to listen, the next work is to understand the power of attention. Attention is far more than interest. It is far more than curiosity. Attention is direction given to life itself. Wherever attention rests steadily, energy flows, and wherever energy flows, results must follow. I have observed that many people sincerely desire change, yet continue to give their attention to confusion, fear, delay, and disappointment. They speak of what they hope for, but attend constantly to what they dread. The law does not respond to words spoken once in prayer. It responds to the dominant direction of attention held day after day. Attention is creative. This is why distraction is so costly. A distracted mind scatters power. A focused mind gathers it. I have often said that man's world is the outpicturing of his inner conversations. Those inner conversations are guided by attention. What one dwells upon becomes familiar. What becomes familiar begins to feel true, and what feels true governs expectation. Expectation is the mold into which experience is poured. This is why it is not enough to wish for peace while attending to anxiety. One cannot expect calm while constantly observing disorder. Life responds to observation as much as to declaration. I once knew a man who complained that nothing ever worked out for him. When questioned gently, it became clear that he spent much of his time recounting past failures, watching others succeed, and anticipating disappointment. Though he occasionally affirmed prosperity, his attention remained fixed on lack. When he learned to withdraw attention from appearances and rested upon truth, his circumstances shifted with remarkable speed. Attention is a form of obedience. Obedience is not submission to fear, but alignment with law. When attention is scattered, obedience is impossible. The mind has been trained to believe that it must monitor everything constantly. It believes that vigilance is safety. Yet constant vigilance without trust produces anxiety. The mind grows weary, and weary minds make poor decisions. I have seen that when people begin to guard their attention gently, anxiety loses its foothold. They stop feeding it. They do not argue with it. They simply stop giving it their gaze. What is not fed grows weak. What is nourished grows strong. This is law. Many people attempt to silence fear through effort. They reason with it, fight it, or distract themselves. These methods fail because they keep attention fixed on fear. Truth requires a different approach. One must turn attention elsewhere. I have often taught the importance of the watchman at the gate of the mind. The watchman does not wrestle with intruders. He simply refuses entry. When a fearful thought presents itself, the watchman does not argue. He replaces. Replacement is power. One may say quietly, "Divine order is now at work in this situation." Then attention must be placed upon that statement until it feels real. Feeling follows attention. When truth feels real, fear dissolves. I have known women who became anxious whenever they thought of their finances. They attended constantly to bills, delays, and comparisons. When they learned to attend instead to supply as a spiritual fact, repeating calmly, "There is no loss in divine mind," their minds settled, and opportunities appeared unexpectedly. The outer change followed the inner shift of attention. Attention also governs time. Those who attend constantly to lack of time feel rushed, pressured, and delayed. Those who attend to divine timing experience flow. They arrive where they need to be without strain. I have observed that people who seem fortunate are often simply attentive in the right direction. They notice opportunities because they expect good. Expectation sharpens perception. An anxious mind overlooks openings. A calm mind recognizes them. Thus, attention must be trained gently, patiently, without force. One does not need to suppress thoughts. Suppression breeds tension. One simply chooses where to rest the mind. Rest is important here. Attention must be calm to be effective. Strained focus is not alignment. It is effort. Effort implies mistrust. Mistrust feeds anxiety. I have often said that faith without strain is the key. Attention guided by faith feels easy. It does not exhaust. When attention rests upon truth long enough, truth becomes habitual. Habit governs behavior without effort. This is why repetition is essential. Repetition impresses the subconscious. The subconscious does not argue. It accepts what is repeated calmly and consistently. One may affirm often, not hurriedly but steadily, "I am divinely guided. I am divinely protected. I am divinely supplied." These statements, when attended to regularly, reshape expectation. Expectation reshapes experience. I have known people who transformed their relationships simply by changing what they attended to. They stopped watching for faults and began attending to harmony. Harmony increased without discussion. Attention is more powerful than correction. Correction focuses on error. Attention to truth dissolves error. I have also observed that attention governs memory. People who dwell on past mistakes keep them alive. Those who withdraw attention from the past and attend to present truth find the past loses its hold. The past has no power except what attention gives it. Release attention, and release follows. This is why forgiveness is an act of attention. To forgive is to withdraw attention from offense and place it upon peace. Peace grows where it is attended to. Anxiety fades when it is starved. I have often said that man's only enemies are those of his own household, his own thoughts. The watchman must be faithful, but gentle. Harsh vigilance creates tension. Gentle authority creates peace. You may notice that as attention shifts, your outer life begins to feel less chaotic. Problems that once felt urgent lose their intensity. Decisions become clearer. This is not because problems vanished, but because attention realigned. Realignment restores order. Order calms the mind. A calm mind perceives guidance. Guidance leads to right action. Right action produces harmony. Thus, attention is not a small matter. It is the rudder of life. You were meant to hear this because attention is ready to be reclaimed. The restless scanning, the constant checking. Nothing important will be missed when attention is placed correctly. In fact, more will be received. Life responds generously to focused, faithful attention. And as you learn to rest your attention where truth lives, you will find that anxiety no longer governs your days. Calm becomes familiar. Confidence grows quietly. And you begin to realize that attention, once disciplined, becomes the most powerful ally you possess. Just remain gentle, just remain faithful, and allow attention to do its quiet work. When attention has been gently reclaimed and no longer wanders restlessly among fears, appearances, the next unfolding reveals itself naturally. It is the understanding of silence, not as absence, but as power. Silence is not emptiness. It is the place where truth gathers strength. Most people fear silence because they believe nothing is happening there. In truth, everything of importance begins in silence. I have observed that people often attempt to solve their difficulties by thinking harder, speaking more, or explaining themselves repeatedly. They believe movement creates resolution. Yet movement without guidance scatters energy, while silence gathers it. The soul speaks only when the noise subsides. Silence is not something to be forced. It is something to be permitted. When the mind ceases its constant commentary, even for a moment, deeper intelligence becomes audible. This intelligence does not argue. It does not reason anxiously. It simply knows. Many believe that silence means passivity. They confuse stillness with inactivity. Yet stillness is the highest form of action when aligned with law. The seed grows in darkness, not in motion. The roots deepen unseen before the tree appears. I have known people who exhausted themselves by continual discussion of their problems. Each retelling strengthened the problem in their minds. When they learned to stop speaking of difficulty and rest in silence instead, solutions appeared without effort. Silence interrupts fear. Fear survives on repetition. Repetition requires noise. Silence breaks the cycle. I have often said that the Christ within works in quiet ways. When one casts the burden inwardly and ceases anxious thought, the work proceeds without interference. Interference is always mental before it becomes outward. People often pray anxiously, filling prayer with words. They plead, explain, and repeat from fear. This is not prayer as law understands it. True prayer is agreement made in stillness. Agreement requires silence. Silence allows conviction to settle. Conviction carries power. I once knew a woman who felt compelled to speak constantly about her worries. She feared that if she stopped thinking and talking, She would lose control. When she finally allowed herself periods of quiet, her anxiety softened, and guidance arose naturally. She later said that silence had done more for her than years of effort. Silence is the womb of faith. Faith grows without strain. Strain disrupts faith. I have observed that those who cultivate silence become more discerning. They speak fewer words, but their words carry weight. They act less frequently, but their actions are effective. This is because silence sharpens perception. Guidance missed creates confusion. Confusion breeds anxiety. Thus, silence is essential. One must learn to be alone with one's thoughts without engaging them. This does not mean suppressing thought. Suppression creates tension. It means allowing thoughts to pass without following them. Thoughts are like visitors. Some bring truth, others bring fear. Silence allows one to see the difference. I have often taught that the mind must be trained gently, not harshly. Harsh discipline creates rebellion. Gentle authority creates order. One may simply sit quietly and say inwardly, "I trust divine intelligence to reveal what I need to know." Then one must wait. Waiting is not idleness. It is expectation without strain. Expectation without strain invites revelation. I have known men who made grave errors because they acted before silence had done its work. Later, when they learned to pause, to wait inwardly, their choices align naturally with good. Silence reveals timing. Timing governs success. Success restores confidence. Confidence dissolves anxiety. People often rush because they fear missing opportunity. Yet opportunity waits for readiness. Silence prepares readiness. I have often said that divine order does not hurry. It unfolds. When one aligns with this rhythm, life feels less urgent and more intelligent. Silence also teaches restraint of speech. Many difficulties are prolonged because they are spoken of repeatedly. Speech gives life to conditions. Silence withdraws that life. I have known people who healed relationships simply by ceasing to speak of grievances. In silence, resentment dissolved and harmony returned. Silence allows forgiveness without effort. Forgiveness restores peace. Peace steadies the mind. I have observed that silence before sleep is especially powerful. When one casts the burden inwardly and enters rest without anxious review, the subconscious receives instruction. Solutions often appear upon waking, complete and calm. This is not coincidence. It is law. The subconscious responds to silence more readily than to speech. Speech addresses the conscious mind. Silence addresses the deeper one. I have often said that the deepest truths are received, not reasoned. Reasoning is noisy. Receiving is quiet. When silence is honored regularly, the mind loses its compulsion to control. Control gives way to trust. Trust allows guidance to act unhindered. I have known people who feared silence because they believed they would feel empty. Instead, they discovered fullness. Silence revealed a presence they had overlooked. That presence is always available. It waits patiently for noise to subside. Silence also teaches humility. Not humility as self-diminishment, but humility as receptivity. One admits inwardly, "I do not need to manage everything." Management without guidance exhausts. Guidance without management simplifies. Simplification removes anxiety. I have often said that man's work is to trust and obey. Obedience includes obedience to stillness. One must stop long enough to hear. You may notice that, as silence becomes familiar, your need to explain yourself diminishes. You feel less urgency to justify, defend, or anticipate. This is a sign of growing alignment. Alignment calms the nervous mind. Calm allows insight. Insight guides action. Thus, silence prepares the way for discernment, which will follow naturally. You were meant to hear this, because silence is now possible, not because life is perfect. The soul has asked for rest. Silence is the answer to that request. Do not fear it. Honor it. Sit with it, and allow it to speak in its own perfect way. For what rises from silence carries authority, and authority, once received, replaces anxiety with calm knowing. Just allow the quiet. It knows what to do. When silence has been honored and the mind no longer rushes to fill every space with thought, the next revelation appears of its own accord. It is the understanding of right action. Many believe action must be constant to be effective. They fear stillness will cause them to fall behind. Yet action taken without guidance scatters power, while action taken at the right moment multiplies it. I have observed that most anxiety arises not from doing too little, but from doing too much without order. People hurry from one effort to another, believing movement itself will secure safety. But safety does not come from motion. It comes from alignment. Right action is always calm. It does not push. It does not plead. It carries a sense of inevitability, as though the step being taken has already been approved by a higher intelligence. When action feels strained, hurried, or desperate, it is rarely right. Many people ask, "What should I do?" when the more useful question is it time to do anything at all? Silence answers this question before the mind can reason itself into confusion. I have known men who acted too soon and spent years undoing the results of that haste. I have known others who waited until clarity settled and moved once cleanly, decisively changing their lives with a single step. The difference was not intelligence or courage. It was obedience to timing. Timing is a spiritual law. It cannot be forced. When forced, it resists. When trusted, it cooperates. Anxiety often disguises itself as urgency. The mind says, "If I do not act now, something will be lost." This belief creates unnecessary pressure and clouds discernment. Loss does not come from waiting. It comes from acting without alignment. I have often said that there is no loss in divine mind. This statement, repeated calmly, dissolves fear of delay. When fear dissolves, timing becomes clear. I once knew a woman who felt compelled to make a decision immediately because she feared being left behind. She acted from that fear and regretted it deeply. Later, when faced with a similar choice, she waited quietly, repeating, "Divine order now governs this situation." The correct path revealed itself without struggle. Waiting, when guided by faith, is action at a higher level. Action guided by faith is effortless. Effortless action does not exhaust. Exhaustion feeds anxiety. Thus, right action preserves peace. I have observed that when people begin to trust timing, their lives appear smoother to others. They arrive at opportunities naturally. They meet the right people without pursuit. This is not luck. It is law obeyed. Right action is not loud. It does not announce itself dramatically. It often appears as a simple impulse, gentle, reasonable, unforced. Those who listen for drama miss it. Those who respect calm recognize it. The body responds to right action with ease. There is no tightening of the chest, no racing of thought. One feels settled even while moving forward. Wrong action feels agitating even when it succeeds temporarily. It leaves behind restlessness, doubt, and the sense that something was overlooked. I have known people who achieved outward success through force and later found themselves anxious and dissatisfied. Their success lacked alignment. When they later adjusted their actions to follow guidance rather than fear, peace returned and success stabilized. Right action also governs speech. Many speak too quickly, driven by fear of misunderstanding or rejection. Yet words spoken before clarity often complicate matters. Silence before speech allows the right words to arise. I have often said that words spoken from calm carry authority. Authority commands respect. Respect simplifies relationships. Simplified relationships reduce anxiety. I have known people who repaired broken connections simply by waiting before responding. The pause allowed wisdom to enter, and their words healed rather than harmed. Right action also teaches restraint. Not every impulse requires expression. Discernment, born of silence, selects only what belongs. Selection creates order. Order calms the mind. Calm reveals guidance. Thus the cycle continues. Many people believe they must constantly manage outcomes. They attempt to control results rather than obey law. Control creates tension. Obedience creates ease. I have often said that man's work is to cast the burden and move as guided. When the burden is cast inwardly, action becomes lighter. One may affirm quietly, I am guided to act at the right time in the right way. This affirmation, repeated without strain, trains expectation. Expectation governs experience. I have known individuals who once feared making mistakes. That fear paralyzed them. When they learned to trust guidance rather than fear error, their actions became precise and confident. Mistakes decrease when fear is absent. Fear clouds judgment. Trust sharpens it. Right action also restores dignity. One no longer rushes to please or impress. One acts from inner authority. Others sense this and respond with respect. Respect invites cooperation. Cooperation eases life. Ease dissolves anxiety. I have observed that when people stop forcing action, they experience relief. The mind no longer feels responsible for everything at once. Responsibility is shared with higher law. Shared responsibility restores balance. Balance steadies the nervous system. Steadiness allows joy. Joy naturally follows right action. Thus, right action is not about doing more. It is about doing what belongs to now. What belongs to now is always manageable. Anxiety arises when one attempts to do tomorrow's work today. Tomorrow's work will reveal itself in its own hour. I have often said that divine order is exact. It does not forget. It does not delay maliciously. It arranges precisely. Trusting this truth removes the pressure to rush. Pressure is unnecessary. Alignment is sufficient. As you continue to listen, you may feel less compelled to hurry through life. Decisions may feel less heavy. This is not indifference. It is maturity. Maturity knows that right action waits patiently for its moment. And when that moment arrives, it moves without hesitation. No strain, no confusion, no anxiety, just clarity, carrying you forward in perfect ways. Remain patient, remain attentive, and allow right action to reveal itself naturally, as it always does when silence has been honored and trust restored. The way is already preparing itself before you. You need only walk when it opens, when right action has been understood and the soul no longer hurries ahead of. Guidance. A deeper law begins to reveal itself. The law of expectation. Many people believe they live by hope, yet are secretly governed by expectation. Hope looks forward with uncertainty. Expectation rests quietly, assuming fulfillment. Life responds far more readily to expectation than to hope. I have observed that people often pray sincerely, speak beautiful words, and yet inwardly prepare for disappointment. They say, I trust, while secretly expecting delay, loss, or refusal. The law does not respond to surface words. It responds to the underlying assumption held consistently in consciousness. Expectation is the silent command sent forth at all times. Whatever one calmly expects must appear. This is why anxiety is so costly. Anxiety is expectation pointed toward fear. It rehearses undesirable outcomes and then wonders why peace is absent. Fearful expectation instructs life just as clearly as confident expectation. I have often said that faith is not pleading for good, but assuming it. When one assumes good without argument, good hastens toward manifestation. When one hopes while bracing for disappointment, results hesitate. I once knew a woman who longed for harmonious relationships, yet expected conflict. She watched for offense, prepared her defenses inwardly, and felt anxious before conversations even began. When she learned to expect harmony instead, affirming calmly, "I am surrounded by goodwill," her experiences shifted without effort. Expectation reorganizes perception. Perception shapes experience. Experience confirms expectation. Thus, the cycle continues until interrupted by truth. Many people misunderstand expectation as something they consciously choose once. In truth, expectation is trained through repetition. Whatever is repeated inwardly becomes normal. What becomes normal is expected. What is expected appears. This is why repetition of affirmations is essential. Not shouted, not strained, but spoken calmly until they feel ordinary. I have often taught that the subconscious mind accepts what is impressed upon it without argument. It does not distinguish between fear and faith. It accepts repetition. Thus, one must be careful what is repeated. Complaints repeated become conditions. Fearful stories repeated become experience. Truth repeated becomes law in one's affairs. I have known men who expected scarcity because it had always been so. They did not consciously choose this belief. It had simply become familiar. When they began to repeat steadily, "My supply comes from God and cannot be depleted," their expectation shifted, and opportunities arose unexpectedly. Expectation also governs time. Those who expect delay experience it. Those who expect right timing move smoothly through life. This does not mean impatience. It means trust. Trust does not watch the clock. Trust allows unfolding. I have often said that impatience delays good. Impatience is expectation of lack. Calm expectancy accelerates fulfillment. I once knew a man who expected every plan to fail. He spoke of being unlucky, though he worked diligently. When he learned to withdraw attention from past failures and expect success quietly, his results improved dramatically. Expectation also influences how others respond to us. People sense what we expect from them. Expectation of respect invites respect. Expectation of rejection often invites distance. This is not manipulation. It is correspondence. Life mirrors expectation faithfully. An anxious person often expects harm unconsciously. This expectation keeps the nervous system alert and tense. When expectation is redirected towards safety and order, the body relaxes. The body obeys expectation. This is law. I have often said that man must learn to expect the unexpected, his glorious good, rather than unexpected trouble. This shift alone has transformed many lives. Expectation must be guarded carefully. Negative conversations, fearful news, and comparisons can subtly reshape expectation. One must act as watchman, gently refusing to accept fearful suggestions. One may say inwardly, "That does not belong to me." This is not denial. It is selection. Selection governs reality. I have known people who stopped listening to discouraging voices and began repeating truth daily. Their lives simplified. Anxiety diminished. Confidence returned. Expectation rooted in truth creates poise. Poise is calm confidence without strain. Others sense it and respond with trust. Trust invites cooperation. Cooperation eases life. Ease dissolves anxiety. Expectation also governs health. Those who expect vitality recover more easily. Those who expect decline struggle. This does not mean ignoring care. It means aligning expectation with life rather than fear. Life responds to life-affirming expectation. Fearful expectation interrupts healing. I have often taught that the body is the servant of the mind. When the mind expects strength, the body responds accordingly. Expectation must be patient. It does not demand immediate proof. It assumes fulfillment is underway. Monitoring delays manifestation. Monitoring implies doubt. Doubt weakens expectation. One must learn to expect and release. Release allows law to act. I have known people who practiced this faithfully. They expected good, released concern, and lived calmly. Their affairs improved steadily without drama. Drama often indicates expectation mixed with fear. Calm indicates expectation rooted in faith. Thus, expectation becomes a way of life, not an occasional exercise. When expectation is aligned, the mind rests. There is no need to rehearse disaster. Peace becomes familiar. Familiar peace feels safe. Safety dissolves anxiety. I have often said that expectation is the open door through which good enters. One must hold the door open without watching it nervously. Holding without watching is trust. Trust completes the circuit. As you listen now, you may feel a subtle shift, a sense that waiting need not be anxious, that anticipation can be calm, that good can be assumed without fear. This is the work of expectation realigning itself. Allow it to settle. Repeat truth gently. Withdraw attention from fearful forecasts. Expect good quietly. And life, obedient to law, will respond accordingly. Expectation, once purified, becomes one of the greatest sources of peace you will ever know. For when you expect rightly, anxiety no longer has a future to rehearse, and the present becomes sufficient. Just remain faithful to this inner practice. It will not fail you. When expectation has been purified and the mind no longer rehearses fear, while hoping for good, there comes a moment of quiet authority. This moment is not announced. It is felt as a deep settling within. One no longer asks repeatedly, "Will it happen?" One simply knows that what has been set in motion by law must complete itself. It is obedience. I have observed that many sincere people remain anxious because they never allow expectation to mature into certainty. They expect good for a moment, then return to watching appearances. They loosen their grip only to tighten it again. This constant checking interrupts the law, not because the law is weak, but because it requires steadiness. Steadiness is a form of faith. Faith that wavers exhausts the mind. Faith that rests restores power. When certainty is accepted inwardly, identity begins to shift. One no longer sees oneself as waiting to be answered, but as one who has already been heard. This change of identity alters everything. Anxiety cannot remain where identity is secure. I have known people who lived for years as seekers, always hoping, always striving, always questioning. Their lives were filled with effort but little peace. When they finally accepted that divine intelligence was already active on their behalf, their striving ceased and their results improved. Striving is the sign of mistrust. Trust produces calm. Calm sharpens perception. Perception reveals guidance. Thus, certainty is not passive. It is the foundation of right movement. I have often said that man must make a demand upon the law and then step aside. Stepping aside does not mean inaction. It means ceasing to interfere. Interference most often takes the form of worry. Worry is faith misdirected. Faith misdirected produces anxiety. Faith rightly directed produces certainty. One who has reached this stage does not feel compelled to convince others. Conviction does not explain itself. It rests quietly and allows results to speak. I have observed that people with certainty carry a different presence. Their voices steady, their movements slow, their eyes rest. Others sense this and respond with confidence. Confidence invites cooperation. Cooperation simplifies affairs. Simplified affairs calm the mind. Thus, certainty transforms not only inner experience, but outward conditions. Many people fear certainty because they confuse it with rigidity. In truth, certainty is flexible. It adapts without fear. It trusts that whatever unfolds belongs to the pattern of good. Rigid certainty fears being wrong. Spiritual certainty trusts correction. Correction guided by law is gentle. Gentleness preserves peace. I have known men who feared making decisions because they believed mistakes would ruin them. When they learned to trust law rather than perfection, decisions became easier and anxiety faded. Certainty does not demand flawless action. It trusts divine adjustment. Adjustment is always available. Thus, certainty releases the burden of self-condemnation. Condemnation has no creative power. Release restores. Joy. Joy lightens the heart. A light heart cannot hold anxiety. I have often taught that when man casts his burden on the Christ within, he must not take it back again. Taking it back is doubt. Doubt revives fear. One must cast and trust. Trust completes the act. This is why repetition is essential. The subconscious must be trained to accept certainty as normal. One may affirm calmly, "I have done my part. The law does the rest." These words, repeated without emotion, impress the deeper mind. The deeper mind governs experience. I have observed that when certainty is accepted, time itself seems to reorganize. Delays shorten. Interruptions lose power. Events align naturally. This is not mystery. It is correspondence. Life mirrors inner stability. An anxious mind creates scattered outcomes. A certain mind creates orderly ones. Certainty also teaches patience. Not patience as endurance, but patience as confidence. One no longer waits with tension. One waits with ease. Ease signals trust. Trust accelerates fulfillment. I have known people who waited anxiously for years and achieved little. When they learned to wait calmly, their good arrived swiftly. It does not reward effort. It responds to conviction. Conviction cannot be forced. It must be accepted. Acceptance is the final act. Once accepted, the work is done. I have observed that certainty also dissolves the need to compare oneself with others. Comparison indicates doubt. Certainty knows that divine design is individual and exact. Knowing one's place brings peace. Peace removes envy. Envy breeds anxiety. Thus, certainty restores contentment. Contentment is not stagnation. It is alignment without strain. One aligned moves naturally toward growth. Growth without strain feels safe. Safety calms the nervous mind. I have known women who once felt invisible and overlooked. When they accepted inwardly that divine intelligence was arranging recognition in its own way, opportunities appeared without effort. Certainty does not push. It allows attraction. Attraction guided by law is irresistible. I have often said that what belongs to you comes when you are ready to receive it without fear. Certainty prepares receptivity. Receptivity completes the circuit. Once the circuit is complete, anxiety has no role. It fades quietly, without struggle. You may notice now that the future feels less threatening, not because everything is known, but because trust has replaced vigilance. Vigilance exhausts, trust restores. This is the quiet power of certainty. It does not announce itself, it simply stands. And when it stands, life rearranges itself accordingly. Remain faithful to this inner knowing. Do not rush to test it. Allow it to work. For certainty, once accepted, becomes a foundation that cannot be shaken. One calm expectation at a time. When certainty has been accepted and the soul no longer watches anxiously for proof, there remains one final lesson, simple yet exact. It is the practice of non-resistance. Many believe that once faith is established, life will offer no further challenge. In truth, life continues to present appearances, but appearances lose their authority. They no longer provoke reaction. They pass through without disturbance. Non-resistance is often misunderstood. It is not surrender to difficulty, nor is it indifference. It is the refusal to struggle inwardly. All struggle begins in the mind. When the mind resists, it feeds what it opposes. When it releases resistance, power is withdrawn, and conditions dissolve of their own accord. I have often said that what you resist persists. This is not poetry, it is law. Resistance gives energy to the very thing one wishes to escape. Acceptance, rightly understood, removes that energy. Acceptance does not mean agreement with error. It means recognition that error has no power when it is not opposed. Truth needs no battle. It stands. I have known people who spent years fighting circumstances, personalities, delays, and misunderstandings. Their lives felt heavy and exhausting. When they learned to cease inner argument and rest in truth, situations resolved quietly, often without direct action. The mind believes it must defend itself constantly. Defense implies attack. Attack invites fear. Fear breeds anxiety. Non-resistance interrupts this cycle completely. I have observed that when one practices non-resistance, the body responds immediately. Muscles soften. Breath deepens. The nervous tension that once accompanied every challenge loosens its grip. This is not imagination. It is alignment restored. Non-resistance also governs thought. One must refuse to argue with fearful suggestions. Arguing strengthens them. Replacement dissolves them. When fear presents itself, one may say quietly, "This has no power over me." Then attention must be withdrawn. Attention withdrawn starves fear. Starved fear fades. I have often taught that casting the burden on the Christ within is the supreme act of non-resistance. One places responsibility where it belongs and refuses to retrieve it through worry. To take the burden back is to doubt. To leave it is to trust. Trust completes the circuit. Completion brings peace. I once knew a man who reacted violently inwardly to every obstacle. Though outwardly calm, his mind battled constantly. When he learned to stop fighting appearances and affirm calmly, "Divine order now adjusts this situation," his life simplified remarkably. Situations adjusted because resistance ended. Non-resistance also teaches one to stop measuring progress anxiously. Measuring implies doubt. Doubt interrupts flow. Flow completes law. One must allow results to appear in their own way. I have observed that people often undo their good by revisiting old fears. They resist the memory of past pain. This resistance keeps it alive. When they allow the past to rest without reaction, its influence fades. The past has no power except what is resisted. Release dissolves its hold. Non-resistance also governs relationships. Many conflicts persist because they are resisted mentally. One pushes against another inwardly, even while speaking politely. This inward resistance creates distance. When resistance ceases, Harmony often returns without discussion. I have known women who healed family relationships simply by ceasing to resist them inwardly. They stopped rehearsing grievances. Peace followed naturally. Peace is contagious. Others respond to it. Non-resistance also teaches patience without tension. Waiting becomes restful. Time loses its threat. One no longer feels chased by delay. Delay, when not resisted, often reveals itself as preparation. Preparation is not punishment. It is kindness unseen. I have often said that divine order is exact and kind. It does not rush. It does not forget. It arranges. Trusting this truth removes the urge to fight life. Life, when trusted, cooperates. Cooperation simplifies. Simplification removes anxiety. I have observed that those who practice non-resistance carry a gentle authority. They do not insist. They do not argue. They allow. Others feel safe in their presence. Safety invites openness. Openness restores harmony. Non-resistance also dissolves the need to justify oneself. Justification implies fear of judgment. Fear fuels anxiety. Truth needs no justification. Truth stands quietly. Quiet strength endures. I have often taught that man's only enemy is his own resistance. Remove resistance, and nothing stands between him and his good. Good is persistent. It waits patiently for resistance to end. When resistance ends, good rushes in. Thus the journey completes itself without force. Recognition opened the door. Attention gathered power. Silence revealed truth. Right action aligned movement. Expectation shaped outcome. Certainty stabilized identity. Non-resistance allowed fulfillment. Each step removed a layer of anxiety. Each step restored authority. Authority is calm power. Calm power governs life. One who has reached this understanding no longer fears missing guidance, being forgotten, or being delayed. They know that what belongs to them moves toward them under grace. Grace does not strain. Grace does not argue. Grace completes. I have seen people transformed not by dramatic change, but by quiet obedience to these laws. Their faces softened. Their voices steadied. Their lives became orderly. Others noticed. Respect followed. Support appeared. Life responded. This is the true miracle. Not spectacle, but alignment. No struggle, no anxiety, only order, working faithfully. And when one reaches this place, one no longer needs to be reminded to listen closely. Listening has become natural. Presence is established. Life, trusted and allowed, answers perfectly. Under grace, in perfect ways. Below is a long-form epilogue, for you were meant to hear this message today, written entirely in my voice as Florence Scovel Shinn, first person only, with long, flowing paragraphs, no modern expressions, no headings, and no shift in tone or era. This epilogue is designed to function as a closing seal, not a summary, but a deepening, bringing the listener gently from understanding into embodied peace. It is intentionally spacious, slow, and reassuring, suitable for a final 30-40 minutes of listening, and can be trimmed if needed. Now that all has been spoken which needed to be spoken, there is nothing left to urge, persuade, or explain. Truth, once heard, completes its own work. It does not require supervision. It does not ask for proof. It simply settles where it is welcomed and begins to rearrange life quietly, without announcement. Many people believe that after guidance is received, one must immediately do something with it. But this is not so. There are moments when the highest obedience is to remain still and allow the soul to absorb what it has recognized. Assimilation is not delay. It is integration. And without integration, even the clearest truth remains unused. I have seen many receive insight with joy, only to lose its power by rushing back into old habits of strain. They hurry to apply, to test, to measure, to see if it is working. In doing so, they reintroduce the very anxiety that truth had dissolved. Truth does not need to be tested. It needs to be trusted. Trust is not something you manufacture. It is something that grows when you stop interfering. There is a sacred pause that follows understanding. In this pause, the soul adjusts its posture. Old fears loosen, old expectations fade. New assumptions begin to form quietly, often without conscious effort. This pause is holy ground. Do not rush across it. Life does not demand instant transformation. It responds to settled alignment. Alignment is not loud. It is steady. You may notice, in the days that follow, that your reactions soften. Things that once provoked urgency now feel manageable. Situations that once demanded explanation now feel less personal. This is not indifference. It is maturity. It is the sign that authority has returned to its rightful place within. When authority returns inwardly, outer life reorganizes itself accordingly. I have often said that man's work is to keep his inner house in order. When the inner house is ordered, visitors behave properly, circumstances follow rules, confusion does not linger, anxiety finds no resting place. Peace is not something you must protect aggressively. Peace is protected by law when you do not abandon it. Many fear that if they remain calm, something will be missed. This is an old belief, and it must be gently laid aside. Calm does not make one careless. Calm sharpens perception. It allows one to see what fear obscures. Fear rushes. Calm sees. I have known people who believed they survived only by constant vigilance. When they learned to rest inwardly, they discovered that life became more cooperative, not less. Protection increased. Guidance became clearer. They were not abandoned when they stopped worrying. They were supported. Worry has never been a requirement for safety. It has only been a habit, and habits can be replaced. The soul was never meant to live braced against life. It was meant to move with it, trusting that divine order is not fragile. Divine order does not collapse when you rest. It strengthens. You may notice that some old problems attempt to return, not because truth failed, but because habit is persistent. When this occurs, do not be alarmed. Do not argue. Simply refuse to give the old pattern your attention. What is not attended to cannot remain active. Say quietly, if words are needed at all, I know the truth now. That is sufficient. The law does not require repetition born of fear. It requires steadiness born of trust. Steadiness is gentle. Steadiness does not strain. Steadiness holds its ground without effort. I have often said that faith is not emotional, it is structural. It rearranges the foundation upon which life is built. Once the foundation shifts, the house above must follow. This is why you may notice changes appearing without direct intention. A conversation resolves itself. A decision becomes obvious. They are signs that alignment is active. Alignment works even when you are not watching. Especially when you are not watching, you are not required to manage your growth. Growth is natural when resistance ends. A seed does not supervise its own unfolding. It simply rests in fertile soil and responds to law. You are now resting in such soil. Allow yourself to remain there. There may be moments when the mind attempts to return to old questions. What if I misunderstood? What if nothing changes? These thoughts do not require engagement. They are echoes, not messages. Truth does not echo. It stands. Stand with it. The feeling of being meant to hear this message was not sentiment. It was recognition of timing. Timing is one of the most misunderstood laws. People think they can outrun it or miss it. Neither is true. Timing unfolds as readiness allows. You were ready. That is all that mattered. Now, life will meet you at that level of readiness. Do not measure yourself against others. Comparison pulls attention outward and dissolves certainty. Your path is exact. Your unfolding is precise. No one else's pace is relevant to your obedience. I have often said that divine design is individual. When one honors their own design, anxiety about direction dissolves. One stops asking, "Am I doing enough?" and begins living from, "I am guided." Guidance is not loud. It is faithful. It does not abandon you when you are quiet. It meets you there. As this message completes itself within you, you may feel less compelled to seek additional instruction. This is not stagnation. Truth must be digested before more is added. Honor that. Let understanding settle into knowing. Let knowing settle into being. Being is the final state. When being is established, doing becomes effortless. Effortless doing produces lasting results. Lasting results create peace. Peace sustains itself. I have seen lives transformed, not by constant instruction, but by one truth fully accepted. That acceptance did not shout. It did not announce itself publicly. It simply changed how the person stood in the world. They stood quietly, and life responded. Others noticed not because they were told, but because calm is visible, confidence is visible, poise is visible. A person who is no longer inwardly divided carries a different presence. This presence draws respect without demand. It draws opportunity without chase. It draws support without pleading. This is the natural outcome of alignment. You do not need to remind yourself daily of everything you have heard. Truth, once impressed, does not evaporate. It works beneath the surface, adjusting thought, expectation, and response gradually, permanently. Your only work now is to remain gentle with yourself. Gentleness preserves truth. Harshness distorts it. When you notice impatience, return to calm. When you notice doubt, return to certainty. When you notice fear, return to non-resistance. You already know the way back. It is not complicated. It is quiet. You will know that this message has completed its work, not when something dramatic happens, but when you notice that you no longer feel chased by life. That is the sign. Life was never meant to chase you. It was meant to meet you. And now, having listened, having recognized, having allowed, you will find that life does exactly that. Not hurriedly, not forcefully, but faithfully, under grace, in perfect ways. And so there is nothing left to add, only to allow. Remain at peace. The law is at work.